Paul Kenny. I work in the Tipperary Energy Agency. I borrowed a sign from work this shoulder. So I'm going to basically do a soon as screen is unshared.
Yep.
There we go.
Yep. There we go now. That's sorted.
Okay.
Could everybody else please mute their mics?
Okay. I will apologise if there's any local noise. Kids are upstairs having a bath, as happens now that we all work from home. So that's disappeared. That's okay. Yeah. So I'm basically today I'm going to talk a little bit about ourselves, what we do, what our energy transition looks like in Ireland. I'm going to talk a little bit about heat because I think John is going to spend a little bit of time on electricity. And really, I think just maybe putting some clarity around what that means for us in Ireland and what we need to do and be focused on. And I just wanted to be a little bit optimistic in a pessimistic time, and why I think democracy has made a big difference in Ireland and the efforts we've made in terms of the energy transition. To start, we usually have a picture of the energy agency standing in front of our building, but I thought today, with everyone working from home, I'd just share a couple of images of the various different staff members in their house and so on. So the energy agency, the Tipperary Energy Agency, was set up in Tipperary in 1998 as part of a European movement to help local energy agencies support their local and regional communities. So we are governed and run by the local authority, Limerick Institute of Technology, the local development companies, and we're really set up as a social enterprise to further the energy transition in Tipperary and beyond. We have about 30 staff, there's a few of them there, and they work on a variety of different projects, including supporting community power, but also on residential renovation through our Super Homes brand, and non-residential energy renovation through Sustainable Tip and directly through ourselves. So we have a lot of clients, we have a lot of engineers, and our focus really is about decarbonising Ireland's buildings. So I'm just going to do a quick whistle-stop tour. All this data is from Sustainable Energy Authority of Ireland's Energy in Ireland 2019 report, really just to put some things in context. So here is where we use energy. So you can see, you know, a certain amount is used in industry, a lot of it is in transport, some of it is in residential, some of it in services, and a very small amount in agriculture and fisheries. So when we talk about decarbonising Ireland, we need to make sure we include transport and heat very much in that. So what's our fuel use? You can see oil, the big blue bar there is most of it, gas and electricity. So if we decarbonise our electricity completely, it doesn't do much as a percentage of the whole job. So we need to really focus on the other two as well. When we look at transport, the private car, aviation, and heavy goods vehicles are the three. So the private car and aviation are the ones that carry people, and they are a very large majority of our energy use in transport. So we need to think about that when we're talking about modal shift from cars and away from planes. And I think something tells me that green bar is going to fall very drastically for a long time. So this is our electricity. So it's on the way, it's getting greener. So the green bar that started in 2005 is quite a small portion, is up at about in 2018, just over 32%. But 2020 year to date, I heard today that 50% of our energy is coming from renewables. So I'm delighted to correct Kate and say the majority of our energy now comes from renewables, which is great to hear, as of this month, because it's been so windy. And by 2030, our climate plan intends to get us to 70%. And I can see that being very much a realizable target, but it will require a significant amount of investment in renewables. But electricity is on its way, and that's a good news story. When we look at our carbon intensity of our electricity, so as we move away from The peat, which is the blue bar, and the green, which is an unfortunate colour for coal. You can see it very much decreasing over the last number of years, and our electricity is probably at about 290 grams per kilowatt hour. And that really matters when we move into how do we decarbonise our heat and our transport, because the cleaner our electricity is, the cleaner our electric vehicles and heat pumps will be. So you can see from 2005 to now is roughly about half. And it will halve again by 2030. So in summary, when we look at our energy use, electricity is on track. It needs to move on to 70% by 2030 and on to 100% by 2050. Heat and transport are big challenges. So you can see them collectively together, they're about 68%. And that is our primary energy, so the fuel use going into it. So what we need to do to tackle heat and transport is reduce the amount of energy use. Now, I'm not going to focus on transport today, but the key thing about transport is if you want to transport a person and you carry the person and 1.5 tons of a car, it's going to be very inefficient versus cycling, walking, or public transport. So it's reduction in the energy use needed for transport is a big push away from the private car. And when we do push away, we need to electrify the remaining energy use so that we can get it from cheap electricity. And you know, when we talk about democracy and energy democracy, that's the societal shift that we need to do in transport and heat. Really requires consent and leadership by the citizens and engagement by the citizens, because it is every building that needs to be decarbonised. It is every house. It is every commercial building. It's every SME, but it's also every journey. It's every trip to school. It's every holiday. It's everything. So it's really important that's known by people. When we talk about democracy, it's not just electricity. It's also heat and transport. And I will say that, you know, through the Citizens Assembly, the Climate Change Committee as part of the DOL, the politicians now understand what is needed. They just don't know how to get elected after they implement it. And I know I'm copying someone else's phrase of that. So I'll just talk a little bit about what we do in heat. So a lot of our activities are focused on heat outside of the work with community power and other electricity related things. And heat is really decarbonised through, you know, reducing fundamentally the amount of energy that a building needs through insulation and air leakage and windows and all those other things that we all understand. By switching to heat pumps predominantly, with some biomass, particularly from sawmill residues where it's very low carbon and is a good useful waste product. And when we talk about social justice and democracy and understanding how we help the weakest in society, it's my firm belief that giving people money to pay for fossil fuels is never going to eliminate fuel poverty. It will just push it out to the following week. And if it gets very cold, the fuel allowance doesn't cover the cost of it. If it's mild, you're paying for something you may not need. And you know, I firmly believe that the only way to eliminate fuel poverty is make a home not need a lot of money to heat. So we've been renovating buildings under the Tipperary Healthy Homes program funded by SCAI that get somewhere in the region of an 80 to 85% reduction in the cost of heating homes. So from maybe €2,000 down to €300 a year. But that's through things like insulation and heat pumps. And in order to get to the idea of every building being retrofitted by 2040, which is what is required for the Paris Agreement glide path for our carbon emissions, we need to really think long and hard about how we enable that, because it's going to be a 50-60 billion euro investment, which is a small percentage of our overall economic investment in Ireland, but it's quite a significant amount, and that's just homes. It's probably in the region of 90 to 100 billion for all buildings in the state. And thankfully, we can look to other EU regions that have made successes, and even more importantly, we can see where their failures have happened and how we learn from them. And one of the things that we have very much focused on learning from other regions, particularly in France and Germany, is the idea of a one-stop shop for home renovation. So that's where we set up our super home service. And essentially what that does is it enables people to get good advice, so through a professional, where we find and work with the contractors to deliver a high quality renovation. We organise grants. In time, hopefully next year, we'll have low cost loans, and we make sure that the job is done to a very high standard, and the person who is making the significant investment in their home, which could be 50 or 60,000 euros, they get exactly what they pay for. And the whole point around that is about giving people confidence and certainty that when they go for this type of super home renovation, they get what they pay for. And in time, what we want to get to is the ability that one easy payment per month can cover the cost of the renovation. And when you take off the energy savings, it becomes quite affordable. And that is our vision, and that's what we want to have certain outcomes that are a fraction of the cost of a renovation today. So just to move on, really, that's what we do in terms of heat. I want to make sure, just as part of us thinking about democracy and thinking about how our endeavours are going to be challenged over the next few years, it's really important that we understand what's needed. And getting rid of cheap energy is going to be hard. Our society is addicted to it. Everything we do is based on cheap transport, and this last 2 weeks is really making that quite evident of how things have changed. We won't like being told what to do, and fundamentally that means we will need to travel less, and we will need to spend money on things that we may not like spending money on, like retrofit. And it will require everything we have. It will require us to throw the kitchen sink at this. And that will be undermined by the fossil fuel industry across everything we do. I hear all the time about hydrogen. I hear ads on TV about how we will decarbonize our fossil fuels and so on. And none of those things work. We see an interesting report out today and yesterday about compressed natural gas buses, how they use and emit more fossil fuels than even the diesel buses. And that's been really promoted in Ireland by particular fossil fuel companies to increase their sale of fossil fuels. So it's very important that we keep our eye on the prize and we have clarity of purpose. And I think Greta Thunberg has allowed us be very clear on that. We must eliminate fossil fuel use. We must take personal leadership. It's not the money. While it is the money short term for some people, long term it isn't. And if we maybe think about what the IPCC has said, if we don't reduce our carbon emissions by 7.6% per annum, we have a 50-50 risk of having an unsafe future. Now, if you think about that sort of risk, that's maybe 50 or 25 times worse than the risk of dying from COVID-19. And that's the sort of risk we're having by continuing to burn fossil fuels at the rate we do. So I'm optimistic, and I want to really provide some optimism as part of today. Through the production of the all-party report on climate action and the government's climate plan, myself and Kate and others spent a lot of time with politicians, and I think personally, regardless of the party, all parties now agree, and most politicians who are involved agree on the main policy issues. There isn't an argument about what's needed from a retrofit or societal point of view. I think the policymakers now get it, so that the officials get it. The picture below is the Commission for Regulation of Utilities, who never really would have engaged with civil society groups in the past at an informal level, other than the formal consultations they do. And that was then down in our building in Care with myself and John and one of my staff members, Alan, and one of the board members, where we had a really frank discussion about what is needed to support Ireland moving through this energy transition. And one very important thing we don't talk about too much is the European Green Deal. So, you know, a lot of our energy-related legislation comes from European directives, and the directives that are only coming into force in 2020 and 2021 were directives that were recast in 2017, and they will be recast again as part of the European Green Deal and probably live in 23 or 24, and that will really ratchet up ambition. So we haven't even seen the ambition from the last set of directives, and there's more coming. And there's a lot of money behind the Green Deal, so I'm very positive about that. Some other optimism, these are pre-COVID headlines. When I looked at some of the headlines around climate risk, the global capital markets have very much decided that governments will remove carbon from societies because the risk is so high. And they do not want to be the ones holding the shares in these high carbon utilities. The largest coal company in the world, in the US, went bankrupt last year. Climate change made PG&E go bankrupt as well, or certainly into receivership, which is one of the biggest utilities in the US. And all of those financial advisors are now very much pushing the angle of decarbonization. And when climate risk is applied to banks' balance sheets and funds' balance sheets, and they are made hold climate reserves because they have dirty fuels in their portfolios, they will very quickly want to remove that climate risk from their portfolio. And I see this coming like a steam train over the next 3 or 4 years, and that will reduce the amount of money available for investment in more exploration. And, you know, with oil prices, how they have fallen so quickly with the COVID pandemic, we see that those risks are all coming home to roost. So the financial industry isn't going to get back into that. So in terms of my kind of call to action, I think we all need to understand that fossil fuels are the enemy, and they are fossil fuels are what are causing climate change. And the fossil fuel industry will cling on and greenwash and undermine every decision you make. They want people to buy SUVs, not because they think people need SUVs, because they make more money off SUVs. We're all fine in a Volkswagen Golf, we don't need a Tiguan. The energy future we come to, you must use much less energy, and must buy a lot less stuff. And any bioenergy resources that we have. So you'll hear a lot of greenwashing from fossil fuel companies around how we can use bioenergy. It's important to say there are some very sustainable uses of bioenergy, particularly from wastes. So where a sawmill used to burn waste and not be able to use it for anything useful, it's great to see that pelletized and heat buildings. And particularly waste heat will be hugely useful. But the large-scale production of bioenergy as an energy resource will compete with food and wildlife, and will push up the price of food and push down the biomass of wildlife on our planet. And we need to be very careful about taking bioenergy as a solution unless it is sustainable. And a lot of the European legislation has very tight criteria around sustainability of bioenergy, and it's really important that we know that and apply that. But it does also, in terms of the energy transition, we need to think hard about what our personal responsibility is. So we all need to retrofit our homes. We all need to remove fossil fuels from them. We all need to get out of the fossil fuel car and use cycling, walking, public transport ideally, and electric in some cases. You need to make sure you get clean, green and local products, and be careful about where your products come from, and use that purchasing power and your financial power or your investment power to push society and push governments and push corporations and push SMEs buying better products and services. And finally, you need to demand your politicians enable the energy transition to happen at a local level. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending. And if anyone wants to send any questions through, you can get me at paul@tipenergy.ie, and I will try and answer any questions you may have.